Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Rob Simone. I'm the REIT sector head at Hedgeye, but bridging over into my Bitcoin analyst hat this afternoon. We're very excited to have Cory of Swan Bitcoin. He's the CEO at the company. Cory, welcome. Really quick, I had a list of questions, but given what's going on this morning, I gotta just go for it. What the F with Ripple and this campaign, man? What is going on? I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? I've been on a roll all day, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I guess first, thanks for having me on, Rob and the whole Hedgeye team. It is my first time here, and I'm sure there will be future ones as well. So what happened this morning? I guess Chris Larsen, executive chairman of Ripple, former CEO, Ripple being sort of one of the worst actors historically in the crypto space, probably the most egregious unregistered security sale of all of them. And anyway, they've been on kind of an anti-Bitcoin warpath for years, trying to point out, the reason that their centralized sort of altcoin is better than Bitcoin. And so the latest one is Chris Larsen pledging $5 million of his own money. And he's somehow wrangled Greenpeace and I think one or two other environmental firms into his plot to basically spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt about Bitcoin proof of work mining, and of course promote alternatives like proof of stake, which is inherently centralizing. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on, and raised some hackles across the space. It's funny, even all the other altcoin promoters are like, "Oh my God, this is just so embarrassing. It's so bad." Yeah,
it's pretty bad. Well, we spoke about it on the call this morning, and I think I used the word scam for the first time in my Hedgeye career. So just kind of sick of, not saying it the way it is. So it just doesn't matter anymore. We just got to call it like we see it. So anyway, all right. So welcome with that, with that intro. Anyway, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, what did you do before Swan? Kind of what was the genesis block for Swan, so to speak, and how did it all get started?
Sure. Yeah. So I used to work for really big companies. I worked for Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, McKinsey and Company, worked for Google, got an MBA from University of Chicago. It's kind of very traditional. I decided to get into startups a little over a decade ago. So after Google, I started investing in Silicon Valley startups, advising where I could, looking to operate. And so I've been doing that for the last decade. I'm involved in over 50 companies, had about 15 exits. It's been a really good, fun career out here in California. But about halfway through that, in spring of 2017, with the last bull run in Bitcoin, it smacked me upside the head and said, take a look at this. I did what a lot of people do when they come into the space, especially if you're coming into it thinking that it's more technology than money. And I spent almost a year looking at everything in the crypto space, all the tokens and the ICOs and trading on Binance and Bittrex and all that kind of stuff, and crypto funds, this, that, white papers everywhere, the whole deal. And it wasn't until March or April of 2018 that I realized, oh my gosh, Bitcoin really is special. That is the real innovation here at the core of all this stuff. And everything else is in the best case, maybe a venture bet or a digital equity, as Lynn Alden would say. But obviously, most of them are just kind of outright cash grabs. So I wanted to focus exclusively on Bitcoin. And I spent, the next year kind of rooting around, trying to figure out something useful to do in Bitcoin. Initially started working with the guy who's now kind of the founder of Valkyrie. And we were working on a closed-end fund, and I realized I would actually have to go and leave my young daughters in LA and go to New York and go knock on doors for portfolio managers if that was the gig. And I decided I wanted to do something that was more of a website or something serving consumers. And so the genesis of Swan is really just realizing that education is kind of the key to investing in Bitcoin. The more you know, the more you buy. And so if you are going to do something in Bitcoin, you really have to have an educational content first approach, I think, to have any kind of sustainable margin or brand value, any kind of network effect around your brand. So that's always been the key to the whole thing, has been putting out lots and lots of great content, getting some of the best educators, podcasters, authors in the world of Bitcoin involved in the company as full-time staff, advisors, investors, whatever. And we've just kind of built this great content machine that actually harks back, if you want to bring it full circle, before I even joined Microsoft, my very first gig was even while I was still in college, I was a local NBC TV reporter. I am not the boom goes the dynamite guy. That was somebody else, but it was kind of like that.
Gotcha. Nice. No, that's cool. Swan, what the logo, the name, what does it? What's the origin of it, or what does it represent? It's obviously unique. Yeah, I guess you wouldn't think Bitcoin when you see Swan. So how does that kind of come together?
Yeah, I mean, notwithstanding some Taleb's misunderstandings of Bitcoin today, he remains an influential thinker for me in my life. I've been reading his stuff since, I guess, fall of 2002, when Fooled by Randomness came out, and Malcolm Gladwell did the article on him in the New Yorker. So, I've got dog-eared copies of all his books. I've got the boxed set right over there. And I've given it to all my senior staff last year. So, that's the Black Swan. Bitcoin is kind of that black swan that affects literally everything. And that was, other than a few people, maybe a few dozen to a few hundred people that were still working on eCash and kind of following message boards around digital cash. Very few people expected that to actually get discovered or invented and then start spreading as it has since 2008. So it's a great example of a black swan, maybe the best. It's also a great example of anti-fragility, if you want to take another Taleb concept, but we can get into that another time.
Yeah.
And then Jan Pritzker, my co-founder and CTO, who wrote my favorite book on Bitcoin, Inventing Bitcoin, he really likes Swan because he thinks of Bitcoin as, having been this ugly duckling that had to grow up through the days of the Silk Road and being used for drugs.
It's like Bane, like Born in the Darkness, and like.
There you go, Born in the Darkness. Or I think the sewer rat video that Andreas Antonopoulos put out about 7-8 years ago. Look that up. Bitcoin is a sewer rat. Yeah. So now it's coming into its own, right? Kind of this generation of Bitcoin companies gets to promote Bitcoin as this, beautiful white swan, that's not the ugly duckling anymore. And so that it kind of works in that way as well. But as far as like when I came up with the name, it literally just popped into my head. I was driving on PCH in January of 2020, and we were talking about this Bitcoin savings platform and calling it Save Bitcoin, and I hated that name, and it had no mascot and nothing you could really like build a brand around, and the name Swan just popped into my head.
No, that's awesome. And that book, by the way, for folks who haven't read it, it's a great read, and it's actually available on Swan's website. I've read it a couple times, and it's available in PDF form, so definitely I would personally recommend it. But let's
Swan.com/free book. I'll go ahead and promote it.
There you go.
/free book.
I love that. So maybe talking about Bitcoin a little bit. So when you ask this question to folks, if you ask 100 different people, you probably get 100 different answers and unique answers. But what is Bitcoin to you specifically? Like what does it represent? How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be the first person to say this, but it really is this new base layer for human society globally, right? The most important form of language really is price and the price signal, and the price signal is distorted in all ways at all times through bad money and multiple monies. And so if you can actually increase, let's say, the size of the playing field or the size of the market or the number of market participants is probably the way to think about it. Network effects are exponential. So the more people you can get sort of exchanging goods and services and communicating using an unadulterated price signal, we should be able to unlock productivity gains globally, the likes of which we've never seen before. So I think it could be, very normal by, say, the year 2050 or something like that, that we just have kind of a baseline expectation of like 5 or 6% global GDP growth every year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess like one of the things that you hear a lot, and maybe it's a fallacy, like the utility fallacy. I guess when I think about it, the monetary good that has the most utility is the US dollar, right? Yet it's the vehicle that people want to save or preserve their wealth and time in the least, arguably, right now, or among the least. And so, utility does not equal value. I guess, like, what makes Bitcoin, what gives Bitcoin its value, or that intrinsic word that we hear but may not have any meaning? Like, what makes the monetary good valuable to you?
Yeah. Well, first, because you threw intrinsic up in quotes, I'll give a shout out to Connor Brown. He's a Stanford law grad, and I think he's working at one of the big firms right now. But he wrote an article called "Bitcoin Has No Intrinsic Value," and that's great. So highly recommend checking that out. But what gives Bitcoin value, or it's more like, why do humans see that Bitcoin has value? It's because nobody can control it. Literally no one can control it. The Wall Street Journal today wrote an article about this Chris Larsen thing, saying that the people who control Bitcoin haven't agreed to change the consensus mechanism. And it's like, this is the Wall Street Journal. How does that even get past the editor? And why does someone who's been covering Bitcoin for 5 years or something, and I won't call him out, but he knows better, unless the editor slipped it in there. Like, that's the entire point, is that there is no one who actually controls Bitcoin, and no manager can go and change it. So I think that's what people like. They like that, there can't be government by fiat, by decree. With Bitcoin, it's outside money, as Zoltan Pojar would say. It's outside money. It's the best form of outside money. It's not part of the credit-based system.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And maybe I had this one a little bit further down on the list, but let's have the talk. Let's draw the distinction and make it real for folks between Bitcoin and crypto, right? And really try to make. I personally have been working on this in my own endeavors here at Hedgeye, and it's tough because a lot of people are new to the space. But you touched on it. But why is Bitcoin, and why should be Bitcoin set part and parcel away from crypto in another bucket?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, once digital scarcity is invented, as it was with Bitcoin, and the system actually worked, very soon after that, probably sometime in 2010, 2011, something like that, the race was actually over. There was a Schelling point around Bitcoin. This is what humans will adopt, and you'll never be able to unseat that network effect with another proof of work coin. Any other consensus mechanism, there is no other consensus mechanism that anyone has been able to conceive of, if they're actually being honest and following the laws of physics and math as we understand them. There is no other consensus mechanism that will work to actually be decentralized. Proof of stake is inherently centralizing. It doesn't matter where a consensus mechanism is on the decentralization spectrum. The point is the second derivative, the direction in which it's moving for all proof of stake systems, is centralizing over time.
Yep.
If you have more, you make more, so that centralizes over time. And they have massive scaling problems and all this other stuff. Like, it's just not money. These things are, probably the only way to survive for like an Ethereum or Solana is to seek to be co-opted by banks and governments, and to be subsumed by the fiat system. Because at the end of the day, proof of stake, the fiat system is proof of stake. That's literally what we talk about with the Cantillon effect and the Federal Reserve. Like, it is actually a proof of stake system, essentially, like, $1, one vote kind of thing. So it's just kind of more of the same, sprinkling some blockchain on it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you said second derivative, because at Hedgeye, we think about the world in a within a rate of change framework, and I think what's interesting, based upon what you said, is that proof of work has a flat second derivative on a path to, aka no rate of change towards centralization whatsoever. Whereas
it actually becomes more decentralized over time. So it's the direction you want to be going. It's actually decentralizing over time.
Absolutely.
Becoming more distributed. Like, there will never be, whatever number of people own one Bitcoin today, right? It's something like 700,000 people.
Yep.
That number will never go up materially. It will go down over time.
Yep.
It will become less concentrated. And there will be more nodes securing the network, more miners, all of that. Yeah,
totally. And also importantly, there's this separation between economic stake or economic ownership and voting power, right? Like, which is super powerful. Whereas the rate of change of centralization in a proof of stake system kind of almost definitionally accelerates and centralizes both ownership and control of the rule set. And so I thought it was really powerful what you said when you mentioned the second derivative. It'll resonate with Hedgeye folks. But I guess
I should at least credit where I got it from. I think it was a 2018 post by someone who goes by Stop and Decrypt. So Stop and Decrypt, and I think it was something like Ethereum sells you scaling in as scaling out. And it's basically, computer scientists and distributed network engineers, they see the lie in the whole system and they know it won't work. And they've always known that. You just get kind of confused by the marketing budgets of Andreessen Horowitz and the Ethereum Foundation to confuse people to think that something might be possible here, but it's just not.
Yeah, and for folks that are new, this dovetails back with the earlier comment where like, hey, we're waiting for the Bitcoin people to change the consensus rules. The point is there's no one there to do that necessarily. It's not governed by a foundation or a company at the heart of it. It's a really powerful distinguishing factor.
Yep. Nor if there were people that could control it, if they understood what Bitcoin is, they wouldn't change it. Wouldn't. Mm-hmm. This is the only way to run a fair state-free money.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with that. And it's just important because on this education journey that we're going through, a lot of folks who are new to the space, it's very, we've all been through it, right? Like it's very confusing when you first get there. There's a lot. And we're always learning. I mean, myself, I joke all the time that if I knew 5% of what I need to know, I'd probably be overestimating what I actually know. But this kind of leads into the theme of our talk. I guess, why is it that owning actual Bitcoin, first of all, what is actual Bitcoin? And then why is that so important versus the menu of alternatives that are out there? It seems to be growing every day and getting more confusing, but why does keeping it simple and bringing it in, maybe with Swan, with what you guys do, why is that so powerful?
Yeah. So Bitcoin is a bearer asset, which means that you can, should you so choose, you can take self-custody. You can take custody of your own Bitcoins and you can store it yourself. You can store it with a passphrase. You can use a hardware wallet. You can use a piece of paper and you control the private key that only you who have access to the private key can actually spend that Bitcoin. And that's incredibly powerful. This isn't something that you have to, guard in your safe like gold, although you do want to keep your keys very secure. You don't have to worry about, there's a famous story from a well-known Bitcoin Twitter personality named Bitcoin Tina, having gold in his basement with a hurricane bearing down on Florida. And, being worried that, what should he do? Does he have to pick the gold up out of the basement? And he ended up deciding, foolishly for he and his family to ride out the hurricane instead of taking their gold in the car and heading north on 95, right? What a horrible decision. It's much better to be able to, walk across the border from Ukraine into Poland holding your wealth in your head, or having your wealth not in your basement in Florida with a hurricane bearing down on you, making you, decide between a rock and a hard place. So that unconfiscatability and that self-sovereignty of actually owning the real thing is a big, big deal. And, we're one executive order away from, a repeat of 1933. Now, obviously, I and lots of other people are working extremely hard with regulators and with government in the United States to make sure something like that doesn't happen. But it's a reality in lots of other places around the world where the risk factor is much, much, much higher, that your Bitcoin, your paper Bitcoin, your IOU Bitcoin, your rehypothecated Bitcoin that's held with centralized third parties could easily be confiscated, repurposed, force you to sell at a certain government set price when you never wanted to sell it and you don't want those greenbacks, you want your Bitcoin. So it's very important while you can to buy some and learn how to hold it yourself.
Yep. And, there's always so much chatter around the ETF and what the spot ETF would mean for the market in terms of a source of demand, I guess. But the flip side of that is that it also creates a honeypot, right? We already have a couple of big ones in the form of GBTC and OBTC. If and when that government decree comes down the pike, I personally am one that feels strongly we need to guard against that for ourselves, but just in general for the entire network to not, let those honeypots get too big. I don't know. So how do you guys manage that, by the way, as an exchange and a custodian? What's your strategy towards that?
Yeah, so Swan Bitcoin, swan.com, our KPI internally is to have 0 Bitcoin under custody. We try to teach people to take self-custody. We help them, we advise them, we put out videos about it, and we have experts that help you with setups. multi-sig setups, hardware wallet setups, like all kinds of different ways to store your Bitcoin. Find something that's that you're comfortable with. Work with your inheritance planners to make sure it goes to your kids and their kids, all that kind of stuff, right? It gets pretty complicated when you think about actually having self-sovereignty and having custody over your assets, not just relying on somebody else like State Street or Fidelity to do it for you. Luckily there are a lot of firms out there that do collaborative custody type setups. We're actually working with Spectre Desktop. We have some plans to do some pretty advanced enterprise level multi-sig and sort of collaborative custody things over the next couple of years. But luckily there are good companies out there like Casa that do that as well. So the upcoming advisor services unit that we're launching, where we're actually serving registered investment advisors and FAs, and we're launching with firms that have a little over $200 billion of assets under management. So, probably some of your clients and fans here at Hedgeye will start seeing our name pop up on your platforms and things like that over the next year.
They already have. They've been loving it so far, by the way. It's been
great. Yeah. Awesome. Love it. Yeah. So, but yeah, not just on your platform, like when they're working in, InvestNet and these different, RIA type software platforms, you'll start to see Swan pop up there as an option for your clients. And they think that's going to be really cool. That business, just because of the way it works, that one is going to be fully custodial. And so we're using Fireblocks, which is a very well-known custodian, New York-based. They work with Bank of New York Mellon and Binance and Bittrex and us and 100 crypto funds, $8 billion valuation company. They've got insurance on the assets. It's basically the gold standard for custody. But that's just how that business works. They want to treat it like SMAs or managed futures or something like that, and they'd rather see lower trading fees and an acceptable percent of AUM. But it needs to be sort of in custody to work with the investment advisors. So we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel there and jam something through that doesn't work. We'll just, kind of play ball the way it is for that market. It's really, if you were going to say, have exposure to Bitcoin through GBTC or through a separately managed account or an ETF versus not having exposure to Bitcoin, definitely get that exposure to Bitcoin. It's very much, a next level, sort of level 2 Bitcoiner thing to take self-custody. We do try to take people from, a standing start to fully self-sovereign out of the gate for those that are willing to take that path. But we also are very willing to meet people where they are and help them along their journey as well.
Definitely. And actually, that's a great transition to another question I had. So, coming out of, I guess you could say, coming out of COVID, the narrative was institutional adoption, and we saw a couple of examples from of larger, public companies like MicroStrategy, obviously adding it to its balance sheet. But I think it's probably fair to say that, I don't want to call it disappointing, but fewer large public companies have added Bitcoin than maybe some folks in the market expected. But from where you guys sit, what's going on under the surface? How real is that narrative as it relates to smaller companies, also RIAs, other institutions? What's been the wave, or what's the trend been from what you guys have seen on the ground?
Yeah, so it's massive. I mean, I think the small and medium sized business, they're discovering Bitcoin. I think a lot of it comes down to if you have someone who has effective control over the company becoming a Bitcoiner and getting into Bitcoin. And that was kind of a unique situation, or there aren't that many public listed companies where, one person kind of has the majority of the voting stock, which I believe Saylor did, right?
Yeah. So he's got all the Class Bs.
Of the,
yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. So he had, basically control over it and could make that happen. And it was kind of a perfect storm for his business, right? It was, cash flows were steady, but weren't growing the way that stock analysts like to see. And, he was just kind of generating this massive cash flow. And the way he tells the story makes perfectly logical sense. But it was kind of that nice confluence of factors that I think made it a really good fit for MicroStrategy. That confluence of factors is much, much more common in non-public businesses. And so that's why I think you see a lot of companies in the private markets putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet because, essentially one or two people have most of the control. A lot of times they have, cash flow that's not growing so fast that it makes perfect sense for them to go public. So it makes sense to be looking for, something other than this melting ice cube of fiat to sit on. And Bitcoin is a heck of an asset to add into that mix.
Yep, definitely. And how about, I guess you could kind of lump it all together under current events, but with what we saw in Canada earlier this year, and then obviously Russia and Ukraine, I would imagine yes, and I've heard yes anecdotally, but has that been like an accelerant to the rate of change in people onboarding or attempting to do the one-way bridge onto Swan's platform? Like, how has that kind of all evolved?
Yeah, I think it's been great for audience size. It's been great for signups. It's been great for volumes. It's just we're in one of those periods these last 2 months. We always say gradually, then suddenly. Like, this is suddenly times.
Yeah,
I think we had that exchange on Twitter a couple of days ago. Like, it really just feels like almost every day there's something happening that would have been the news of the week or the news of the month last year. 2021 was a little bit slow after kind of a really fast news year in 2020 in Bitcoin. We're just getting bored up here in the $40,000 to $60,000 range. It's just so boring. Like, win six figures, Rob. Win six figures.
I mean, well, okay, so that's a really good question, and I guess I
didn't mean to open up the price chart TA section of the conversation.
Definitely not. Well, I mean, when people ask me, and by the way, you could ask all the guys at Hedgeye. Like, I never give a price target. Well, first of all, we don't do price targets at Hedgeye on anything, which is kind of interesting and unique. But I don't like to think about it personally in terms of a price target, because I think it kind of misses the point, and it distracts from what like your near-term objective should be, to try to like accumulate as much as you can, as fast as you can, and as cheaply as you can before it becomes whatever it will become. But I guess how do you guys? So this relates to Hedgeye, but how do you guys advise your clients on risk management? And what I mean by that is, like, Swan in many ways is a one-way bridge, and that's a great thing. It's not but for clients maybe more.
Are you referring to the fact that we don't have a sell button and that you actually have to get in touch with us to sell Bitcoin? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, no. I mean, I personally think that's a good thing and it's unique, but I mean more like for a sophisticated institution that's used to thinking about a two-way bridge and wants to, incorporate within their own risk management models. Like, what do you tell that guy when he comes up to you and he's like, hey, like, Cory, you guys have a one-way switch. Like, how do I think about that in terms of my like portfolio allocation, or like whether or not I take on or I take off risk? Like, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there are people that sell. We don't have it on the retail platform, but for Swan Private Client Services and Swan Advisor Services, which essentially functions as like a tech-enabled OTC desk, obviously sells are available there, and there will be advisors doing portfolio rebalancing. Like, we're aware of that. We'll try to convince them never to let their clients sell Bitcoin, obviously, but we know that will happen, and that's okay. People will learn eventually.
Yeah.
But I think over time it'll take a while, and it'll be something that naturally happens as the market cap and price of Bitcoin increases and takes another couple of legs up over the next decade or two. And then by definition, kind of law of large numbers, the volatility in purchasing power, however that's measured, will decrease significantly.
Yeah.
So, at some point there will be fewer and fewer fiat currencies, and I think the dollar will exist for the rest of this century at least. But, I think a lot of these other ones will kind of die off, and we'll be in kind of like a reduced set of options. Because if you have a really bad fiat currency that's not powerful and isn't sort of a global currency, you're going to be better off using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
A lot of countries like El Salvador and others are dollarized, or they're, kind of using the euro or a franc or something like that. And they don't have their local currency. They don't have a local currency, and more nations, it's going to make sense for them not to take on that burden of, the risk of runaway inflation and having to have all these extra people. Like, it's just export that. Let somebody else do that. Let Bitcoin do that for you.
All right, so here's a loaded one for you. If I told you, what is it now? If I said by 2030, the U.S. government would have Bitcoin on its balance sheet, would you take the over or the under on that? Personally, I mean, they kind of already do.
That's literally, that's like a 50-50 bet. Like I'd say, yeah, I think by 2030, the US government will have Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. I mean, it'll definitely have exposure because, you know, BlackRock will be managing some kind of relief program and they'll have some of it in crypto, right? So definitely we taxpayers will have it one way or another through BlackRock and Fidelity and whoever else is managing government.
Or maybe the Fed balance sheet. If I took maybe a little more specific, because I think that's where it gets like a little trickier, maybe. Or
yeah, I mean, like literally putting it next to treasuries and
gold or whatever.
And I don't know. Yeah, probably. I mean, you're just talking about like an even money 50-50 bet, 8 years. Yeah, I'd say yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not big on price targets either. And like, I just kind of laugh at people that think they have any idea where this thing is going. Like it's a random walk upward. It is going up, but it's a random walk.
Sure.
And, you know, cycle
you fit right into Hedgeye. Like you're speaking our language. So
yeah, so many people just get fooled by randomness and they're just like sitting there in a Twitter bubble and thinking that, you know, 1 4-year cycle means there will always be 4-year cycles. And it's like, bro, there was literally like one data point that does not extend to the whole future of humanity. You know, so, but I will say, when people ask me and they say like, how do you think about the price development of Bitcoin over time and what do you think is going to be out there? So there's, you know, public statements that I've made and written about and talked about elsewhere. Like I personally plan my company's finances and my personal, like my family finances with a 90% expectation that we'll see $1 million a coin before 2030.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think there's a 20x
why so bearish?
Of a decade. Exactly. That's what people tell me. Why so bearish? And I said, well, it's a 90% chance. I think there's like a 30 to 50% chance of $5 million a coin.
There's a distribution underneath that.
Yeah, exactly. There's some Monte Carlo spreadsheets back there in my brain. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So it's amazing. Actually, I have a ton of questions in this queue. So I have a couple more because I want to give some folks a chance and be respectful of your time as well. I was on Swan's morning program, just listening in the last couple of days.
Cafe Bitcoin.
I'm sorry, I was blanking on the name. Cafe
10 to
Bitcoin.
12 weekdays Eastern time.
It's awesome. It's like the highlight. It's the highlight of my morning. I'm like actually doing my day job, and in the background, I'm like listening to the smartest people in the space. You know, basically have a 2-hour chat. It's amazing. But Alex mentioned an acronym for a shitcoin exchange program that you guys have. Is that a real thing? Is that like
it's a real thing?
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is it?
It's called it's the Crypto Recycling Amnesty Program, and
awesome.
I think it's the CRAP. But yes, you can you can sell your Ethereum for Bitcoin.
Okay.
We will not sell you Ethereum, but we will sell you Bitcoin.
What do you guys do with the Ethereum afterwards? Just liquidate it and then like buy Bitcoin?
Immediate liquidation.
Liquidation. Okay.
Immediate. Yes. That's instantaneous, in fact.
Okay. That's amazing. Okay. So in your mind, this is a huge question. You could probably go on for hours, but where do we go? Where does Bitcoin go from here? Like what? Let me get a little more narrow. You mentioned the 40 to 60K range and how it's getting tired. What in your opinion, what's the hurdle to get us out of that? Like what has to happen between now and 100K to get into those 6 figures? Like 6 digits before,
And who knows? It just coils and coils and coils, and the coin transfers from weak hands to strong hands. And at some point, there's just like way less marginal supply than marginal demand. And it's some Tuesday afternoon, and this thing's going to go up like 10K in a few hours.
The God candle.
The God candle's coming, man. I mean, it's just how it works. And that dynamic of increasing demand against fixed supply, that is something that we can count on for the next few centuries. And it is just going to cause some really, really weird things. And at some point, leverage shorts get caught off sides. It's happened every year, multiple times per year for the last 12 years.
Sure.
And it'll happen again, as it just did, yesterday or the day before. And we'll see it exaggeratedly so in the future.
Something crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll probably.
So I just don't try to time it. Don't try to time it. It's just don't try to time it.
Yeah.
Just have your allocation. If you have more dollars that you're earning or more yen that you're earning or whatever, take some of that and put it into Bitcoin every day, week, or month. automatically, ideally. So you just set it and forget it. That's the winning strategy.
So that's a good, actually, that's a really good, maybe a second question before I get to the last one. One question that we've gotten a couple times, and I'm sure you have as well, Swan operates globally in a way, like you can effectively explain it to the audience. Like,
yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So you can buy Bitcoin internationally through Swan Private Client Services, but it's wire transfer only. So you've got to have an account that can send a wire with US Fed wire. But yeah, we have clients in over 100 countries now. In fact, more than half of our private client sales, so probably about 25 to 30% of total sales, comes outside the US. Gotcha. The website and the bank transfer funding is US only still.
Gotcha.
Although we do have plans to expand to Europe in the next couple of years.
Got it. Okay. This is a maybe one that's a little surprising, but so Bitcoiners, do we have any blind spots, and what do you think they are, in your opinion?
Well, all humans have blind spots, and the blind spots of different humans are different. So, yeah, some Bitcoiners have huge blind spots in all kinds of different areas.
Maybe what's the most common one? Yeah.
I don't know. I guess maybe just kind of, we ran a big PR campaign last summer that continues to this day called Bitcoin is for everyone. And I think that's a big deal. And I think that, Bitcoin naturally aligns much more easily with kind of a libertarian school of thought, an Austrian economic school of thought. And traditionally, those have been much more aligned, especially in recent decades, with the political right, especially in the United States. And so I think that, a lot of Bitcoiners can have a bit of a blind spot. And maybe this is a way to look at it. They'll be much more willing to put up with ignorance about Bitcoin from someone on the political right and be like super nice to them and bring them along and meet them where they are and try again patiently to like bring them along. And then if somebody from the left has some misconceptions about Bitcoin, it's just like knives out. just crushed, kill them, right? So I think that maybe is one thing. Like, you may actually have somebody that's politically right oriented who is way worse on Bitcoin, but people will still be nice to them and help them, see the light eventually. Yeah. And I think, I struggle with it too, man. I went to University of Chicago and I'm steeped in, monetarist and Austrian economics, and like I don't like the way this thing works. And I think MMT, maybe I'm a little bit too mean to some of the owls on Twitter, but it's hard because they're so dumb.
Yeah, I think
I'm way meaner to people that I subjectively deem to be disingenuous. Well, so if I actually think somebody's lying or misleading deliberately, then it is knives out for me. But if somebody is kind of an honest participant, I'm super nice to journalists. I'm very kind to 100%. Politicians that don't quite understand yet. It's really the actual combatants that will get the worst of Cory in the media.
And the bad faith actors, like I'm sure you saw this, but Lynn Alden yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, she recorded a session with Alex DeVries, and I tip my cap to her because I would not have been able to remain as patient as she did. The question was well, hey Alex, if Bitcoin, continues to increase its renewable penetration, would you reconsider your position? And literally it was well, let's talk about proof of stake. That was the response. And it's just wait, really? That's just not an honest actor. And then at that point, it's whatever comes, you kind of deserve it. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, she's pretty spectacular when it comes like that. I mean, sometimes only the audience knows that she has completely wiped the floor with her opponent. I mean, I've seen her go on, Real Vision and just, literally eviscerate Raul talking about altcoins or something like that. And, Raul doesn't even realize that he's been made to look like a total buffoon.
It's like some three-dimensional chess. It's amazing. Okay, so before we go to Q&A, I know, you and I have obviously spoken about this, but Swan has some pretty exciting developments or news. I don't know, tell us about it.
Yeah, sure. So, we've been in market now for, tomorrow will be 2 years. So we launched March 30th of 2020. So that's exciting. It's been kind of a meteoric rise for us. We're heading into raising a Series B in Q2, which would be really cool. Got 55 people now. pulling people over from Goldman and Bridgewater and Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, kind of beefing up the business side. The engineering team is spectacular. We finally have an app coming out here in the next week or two, so that'll be great. I think that's a great way to kind of spread the word and get friends involved and get them on the platform. Everybody likes to have an app. Again, you mentioned Swan Advisor Services. That's a big deal. We're building a Lightning wallet into the app later this year. So you'll actually be able to, spend Bitcoin very easy, instantly, and, basically for free over the Lightning network. So that'll be really cool. And then I think, just generally some of the other things that we've got going on, for Bitcoiners. We launched Bitcoiner Jobs last year, which is the biggest job site in the space. So I've matched, hundreds, maybe thousands of candidates there. I got 150 companies listing there. We came out with a Bitcoin benefit plan last month. We'll be doing some PR around that here in the next few weeks, but that lets companies choose to give Bitcoin to their employees as a fringe benefit. So just kind of like a gym membership or, spa day or something like that. You can just sign up and give them a little bit of Bitcoin every month. So that thing is just flying off the shelves. We've got dozens of companies signed up for that. I think the first sats go out on the 31st. So yeah, the first monthly Bitcoin benefit plan participants are March. So that's going to be really exciting. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin in general, we launched a great educational product called the Bitcoin Canon. So you can just go to swan.com/canon, CANON. And basically that's the 1,000 best pieces of Bitcoin educational content from the last 12 years, organized into rabbit holes by some of the brightest thinkers in the space. So you could go and you could actually check out, a course essentially that like Len Alden has put together about Bitcoin and energy, or you could get, maybe Rob will create one about Bitcoin and real estate, and kind of looking at the analogies that people have put together over the years to help real estate folks kind of understand what Bitcoin is. There's Bitcoin 101s, there's Bitcoin as payments, all these different things. So, I think we're building a big company. The goal is to be the first major index publicly listed Bitcoin focused consumer company. There are a couple of miners that are listed, like Riot, which I'm on the advisory board of, and Mara, and a few others. But there hasn't yet been kind of a startup that's grown in the Bitcoin only space and actually gotten public that's focused on consumers. So we're trying to be that first one, hopefully here in the next 2-3 years.
That's great. It's really exciting. Okay, so let's go into some of the questions from the audience here. So I'm going to just read them off. So the first one from John, well, there's two from Gianluca in Toronto that have been voted up in the queue here. Cory, how do you look at Bitcoin and compare it to ETH? Does a world where they complement each other exist? Are they zero sum? How do you think they're the same or different? How do they impact each other? Just kind of like how they interact
Sure.
with each other.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin doesn't really care about ETH at all. I think, ETH is going to need to, Ethereum's management team basically will continue to have to make decisions about partnerships and assets and, staking and, whether they let Andreessen and friends kind of take all the mining fees through Lido or whatever, centralized, it's basically like a redo of EOS really, with distributed or delegated proof of stake is essentially the plan for Ethereum after the merge, spurge, plurge, whatever is coming up. Even having a roadmap like that is just a complete disaster for something that's in production. It's hilarious. That's like a startup business plan. But I think that there's probably enough money in Ethereum that it continues to exist for quite a while. I just think it'll basically just have to, they're doing exactly what you would expect game theoretically, which is kind of try to sell yourself as much as possible to JP Morgan and get as many governments involved as possible and try to, sort of jam yourself into the World Economic Forum and, essentially get involved in finance and get involved in the legacy finance and try to be kind of like a mega IT project doing things in the finance world. But it's not money. It'll never be money. It's the cost of using the system goes up as there's more demand. Like that is not going to go away. That problem of if more people use it, it gets more expensive. It's going to be inherent for any of these proof of stake platforms, and they'll never be able to solve that one.
Yep. So don't listen to the ultrasound money meme. Just when you hear that, run away. Just understand.
Man, even the serious Ethereans laugh.
Don't even.
They hate that meme the way that real Bitcoiners hate S2F.
Right. Okay, so another one from Gianluca. Bitcoin's network fees are expected to grow significantly after the next halving, making the network too expensive for the average person to transact. What are the expected solutions to keep costs low? Layer 2s, the Lightning Network, something else? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, the Lightning Network has been scaling exponentially, and I think that's where you buy coffee with Bitcoin. You don't need to worry about the rest of it. And then if you're thinking about, multi-million, multi-billion-dollar transactions, compare that to shipping gold or something like that, and it's way, way, way cheaper. So, it really hasn't come up much in the last couple of years. I feel like that was kind of the latest FUD narrative promoted by altcoiners in kind of 2013 to 2018 maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
But as the Lightning Network has grown as people said that it would, and people are actually using it around the world, and you can use it in the West if you want to. It's just easy to use credit cards. It's not easy to use credit cards in lots of places around the world, so they use Lightning. I think this one's basically settled already.
Yeah, so now we're on the ESG because it's, they're running out of...
That's the next one.
That's the next one.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
There's nothing after that. What's left? I mean, I'm sure they'll come up with something, but...
No. The next one after that will be, you've already seen it in The Economist. It's used by right-wing hate groups, which is kind of like, the internet's used for porn, so you can't have the internet anymore.
It's exclusionary, like that. That's
exclusionary. Yeah, and then it'll be we need to redistribute all this Bitcoin because it was unfair that some people got a lot of it early on. So we'll have to, how are we going to take care of the people that didn't get enough Bitcoin?
Meanwhile, we were being called stupid and, fantastical all along the way, and I don't know.
It was. Listen, I wish that I was in earlier. I wish I was in way, way earlier, man. It was publicly announced, all there for all of us to see. We could have been running a freaking node, a mining node, on our old laptop.
I know.
January 3rd of 2009, getting 50 Bitcoin rewards, once or twice a day if you were running a normal laptop.
Well, I was telling a colleague about Max's story about how he gave Alex Jones, like irrespective of what you may or may not think about Alex Jones, but how he gave him 10,000 Bitcoin and like Jones lost it, and he looked at me, he's like, wait, that's like $500 million. Like, yeah, that was kind of lots of stories like that you'll hear, but. Yeah, so anyway, okay, so let's keep going down this list. So actually, this comes from a colleague of mine, and it's related specifically to Swan. Cory, do you plan to obtain a BIT license? I wanted to sign up for their service, but couldn't as a New York resident. I realize it's a huge hassle, lots of red tape, but I'm curious if it's on your plan or if you have no intention of ever doing it.
Yeah, so we actually did serve New York for about a year, and we basically got enough confidence that we were fine to operate with our model because we don't actually touch user funds. We sit on top of other companies. Mm-hmm. The problem was that New York decided to be the first state out of the 50 to not reciprocate other states' companies' trust status. So Prime Trust is a Nevada registered trust company, and that lets them operate the way that they do in 49 states, but no longer New York. So Prime Trust needs to create a New York state-based trust company, and then we'll be able to open up New York again. But we don't actually Swan doesn't fall under the BIT license. Got it.
Okay. This one comes from, excuse me, from Nadia.
But let me just tell him, just set up a Delaware entity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. That's interesting. A lot of corporations and REITs incorporate in Delaware and Maryland. So exactly. You said that, yeah. Okay, this one comes from Nadia. Cory, what is your take on the risks of U.S. policy towards Bitcoin? And this is good because you talked about the efforts that you have and others have in D.C., but it seems like the U.S. government is generally warming up to crypto or digital assets, but the welcome mat does not appear to be rolling out as much for Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that?
That might just be a matter of, selective attention or selective perception. That's not my read on it, frankly. I read on this stuff every day, all day, including all the crypto stuff, and I don't think that's probably accurate. But regardless, I think the first question is the important part, the first part of the question, which is, what is the regulatory risk to Bitcoin in the United States? I would say I had it at like mid single digits, some kind of like major adverse action toward Bitcoin and Bitcoiners in like early 2019, maybe mid 2019. And then after everything that we saw with kind of the institutionalization of Bitcoin in 2020 and companies putting it on their balance sheet and Square going, full into it, and Tesla buying it, and Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones, and now even Ken Griffin saying he got it wrong, like all this kind of stuff. Like I just don't see it, man. It's definitely sub 1%, probably sub 0.5%. That's something like really, truly sort of ugly toward Bitcoin and Bitcoiners comes out of the U.S. government, in my view.
Yeah.
It was very de-risked. I think Ross Stevens from NYDIG said like the left end of the distribution is chopped off.
So chop off the tail,
Chop off the tail, right? Like it's not going to zero. It's not getting banned. So
yeah, and folks may not be aware of this at home, but there's also this like grassroots effort going on down in DC, like CJ and Jimmy Song. They wrote their book with with Lamar and that whole team, and they've been down there like lobbying staffers as opposed to actual representatives and senators to try to educate them, because like a lot of these guys can't turn on the computer themselves. So there's a lot going on down there, which is out of the public light, but pretty important. And then there was actually a second part to Nadia's question. Also wondering how Cory sees. We already answered this. Like, what lobbying efforts are underway? Okay, so we can skip that one.
Well,
okay.
I can actually just mention that.
Definitely.
I think Bitcoiners were kind of lazy about letting the crypto blockchain lobbyist groups kind of carry the water until last year. And then with the infrastructure bill came out, you basically saw the incentives of the crypto blockchain lobbying groups kind of come to the fore. And you could see that they were kind of arguing for, crypto proof of stake, kind of Bitcoin alternatives, whatever, and weren't really going to the matter. There's just the incentives are, there is no centralized Bitcoin entity. There is no venture fund that owns a huge chunk of Bitcoin the way that they do, Solana, Ethereum, whatever. And those groups get their, the people that work there get their lives paid for by the donations from altcoiners and altcoin promoting VC funds, right? So even if they are pro Bitcoin or big Bitcoin fans or whatever, like their livelihood and their incentives completely depend on promoting altcoins. And by definition, you're only going to sell an altcoin if you find something wrong with Bitcoin or pretend that there's something wrong with Bitcoin. So I think what that highlighted is a need for a Bitcoin only lobby. And you saw very quickly 4 different entities spin up last year and get staffed and start to actually hit the road and meet with reps and governors and senators and state senators and get involved in races. And it's become a huge thing. I mean, there's a Telegram group with, probably 800 to 1,000 Bitcoiners in it, just kind of spreading the word and helping each other with resources. I get involved more with probably things outside the US and just helping with position papers and providing information for, staffers or, presidential aides or things like that with other countries a little bit more than I do in the US. But definitely there are a lot of swans that are involved in these things. And I do sit on the SAT Center Advisory Board, which is the one that was kind of started up by Riot and CJ and a few others.
Sure. No, that's great. That's really good. Really good color. I think we probably have time for 2, maybe 3 more. Okay, so this is an extension of our earlier talk about, people care about price, but putting the dollar term price or the fiat price on the side, what sort of valuation framework or model do you and Swan find interesting or compelling? Like what do you guys use internally, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer kind of like a top-down one because I think all the bottoms-up one just are garbage in, garbage out, basically. They just don't work. But if you think about global store of value as being, the pile of wealth for which Bitcoin is the best tool for the job, and people, deciding to put more of their wealth, that sort of household wealth of $400 to $500 trillion, some percentage of that into Bitcoin, or some people putting most of their wealth into it over some time frame. That's just how I think about the price development for Bitcoin, right? Like the market size today in current dollars is something like $25 million per coin. It's not going to go there tomorrow. So over what time frame is it going to hit some percentage of that? So is it very reasonable that Bitcoin hits 20% of the market for which it is the best tool for the job, storing value? that's kind of reasonable. And that's why I think a lot of people just say like 20% times 500 trillion. So that's $100 trillion. That seems like, $5 million a coin. We could get to that, by 2035 or something like that. And that seems kind of reasonable. $1 million a coin, that's just not that big, right? That's 20 trillion. It's like 1/25th. It's 4% market share for store of value. Like, that seems very achievable. I do think that people will wake up to what Bitcoin is and what all of these other options are not over the rest of this decade.
Yep.
I mean, if we have anything to say about it, certainly trying every day to let people know.
Yeah, totally. And also that's also in today's buying power or in today's purchasing power terms too. Like, you're going to have obviously nominal debasement on top of that. So there's so many different variables.
I always caveat that I'm talking about present day purchasing power.
Yeah.
Although now my statements from last year are completely outdated.
Like, next week they'll be outdated. Like, it's crazy. Okay, so maybe maybe this could be the last one since we only have 4 minutes left. But this is a very specific question that maybe Swan can help with, and this is from Jim in Texas. So, Cory, if an individual, and in parentheses, through a living trust, wants to start a self-custody account and add to it over time, can Swan help with that, and how?
Yeah, that's what we do all the time. Yeah, so you can just sign up for an entity account very easily, and then you can set up automatic recurring purchase, and you can have that actually automatically withdraw for free into your self-custody. So we have free withdrawals, and you can set them up to be either manual or automatic as well.
Yep.
So yeah, cool. That's literally what we're set up for.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like the way I like to describe, because we actually probably like 80% of our dollar volume is actually one-time purchases, but it's really important to have that 20% coming in on the automatic recurring purchases, because over half of our users have a plan set up. Probably 2/3 of our users have a plan set up. And I think that's what makes you you make that commitment, right? You set it and forget it. We say Swan and chill, but that's what turns it into like more of a 401k or kind of a mortgage where you're going to make that payment, or the 401k, it's going to come out of your paycheck automatically. I think that's the baseline of an approach to accumulating Bitcoin over time, is just setting up that automatic recurring purchase plan. And then, when you gain some more conviction, you decide to, sell some stock, or you come into some liquidity from a business or whatever, then you're going to think about a large allocation on top of your recurring purchase plan. But I think you want to set up that automatic savings plan. That's kind of the key to the whole thing.
Cool. Okay, so I want to give you a chance if there's anything you want to leave the audience with, and maybe we didn't talk about Swan, about yourself. But yes, we have about 2 minutes left, so I just wanted to give you a chance to riff.
Interesting. No, I would just say like we're really interested in just getting the word out, in general. So, I've got a Substack, which, it's called the Daily Bitcoiner. You can sign up at cory.substack.com and just get, it's actually comes from the Bitcoin canon. So it's one of those pieces that we've kind of pre-selected and vetted as being, really good and of high quality. So I'll just kind of have a little intro there. So keep in touch with me there. I also am involved in 3 different venture funds in the space. So I would just say, like, for any of I'm assuming a lot of accredited investors at Hedgeye, if you're interested in any of those, I'm on the advisory board of the Bitcoin Venture Fund. I'm a GP in El Zonte Capital. I'm the managing partner of Bitcoiner Ventures. And so if any of those are of interest and you want to take a look at Bitcoin startups, which I think will outperform the rest of venture dramatically over the rest of this decade, just because the wind is at your sails with Bitcoin and its rise, you can get in touch directly. I don't mind. Cory at swanbitcoin.com, CORY@swanbitcoin.com. If you want to talk about any of those, I can send you some links on those funds.
Cool. No, that's great. Well, definitely, if anybody logs in any inquiries, we'll send them your way so you guys could talk about it. But Cory, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, it's great to begin and continue the conversation between Hedgeye and Swan, and great to see you guys growing like a weed and doing your thing. So looking forward to chatting again.
Well, I appreciate it, Rob. Tell Keith to heal up, and we'll see you next time. Okay.
Sounds good. Catch you later.